Okay, what's your name?
Sean Pinchin.
And what genre of music do you consider your work to be?
Singer-songwriter, roots music, folk, blues. I think all those would be appropriate. But singer-songwriter with a very bluesy acoustic approach for sure.
Who are your major influences?
Currently my major influences are Kelly Joe Phelps, Chris Whitley, Nick Drake. I started off listening to a lot of Robert Johnson, Blind Willie Johnson, a lot of old blues players and folk singers from the 70s, and pretty much anybody with a very rootsy sort of acoustic vibe. I've always been very attracted to singer-songwriters.
And when did you first start this musical career of yours?
I think I was about 15 when I got my first guitar, and I have been knocking away at it since then. I'm 28 years old now, and I have not stopped, so a little while now.
And what inspired you to make music?
I don't know. I think I've been obsessed with it. I think the first thing I ever recognized on a guitar, or the first video I ever saw of a guitar that really touched me, was Back to the Future, when Marty McFly plays Johnny B. Good.
Oh
Big
yeah, I
Red
remember
335.
that.
I mean, who didn't want to own a guitar after that? I think that was it. And then when I was 15, I finally got my own guitar, and I think I've been pretty much obsessed ever since. And been playing shows for probably the last 10 years.
What are the main themes or topics for most of your songs? Do you think? Do you have any topics or any themes for these?
Yeah, well, I have 3 CDs that I put together myself and that I sell at shows. The first one was definitely about heartbreak and women, and trying to figure out what to do. You know, I was young, just starting out, so my insecurities were all over the place, and I wore them on my sleeve. So I would say that the first CD was mainly about relationships. The second CD kind of guided a few of the same scenarios. It was definitely about a few heartbreaks, but I started going into a little bit more about, you know, trying to describe how to stay positive, stay focused, if that makes any sense at all, trying to keep myself organized, trying to write things about something other than a woman was a big step for me. So trying to write about my beliefs, spiritually speaking. And the third CD that I have released, called A Day Without May, is pretty much all about what I believe I should be doing, and what I think about certain things that other people are doing, and just pretty much my opinion on where I sit at almost 30 years old. Like, my point of view has changed quite a bit since I was 21, and I see people differently, I see work differently, I see shows as different, and I think it's a better representation of what I think and how I feel I should live my life. So, life is a good inspiration for me.
Could you describe the music making process of yours?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I usually sit with a big jug of coffee and I play guitar for 5,000 or 6,000 hours. And when I come up with something that I really like, I tend to try to put words to it. And if a couple days later I can remember the words and the music, I call it a song. And then I play it live for about a year. Literally, I play it live a year and cut and paste it and cut it and fix it. And if it survives that year and I can remember it, I record it. And then there it is. It's a pretty raw way of doing it. I record everything live off the floor, so there's no tracking. So I have to have it all finished at once. So it's kind of a continual process for me.
What has been your biggest challenge as a musician? And have you been able to overcome that challenge?
I think the only challenge that a musician will always face is how to find his own audience. The biggest challenge I've had as an artist is to find people that respect what I do creatively, as opposed to just what I do as a pastime. There are bands out there that make good money playing cover tunes in bars, and there will always be work for them. But to try to step outside of that and to do your thing, and to have your opinions documented, and to play your songs the way you want them played, that requires a lot more time, a lot of practice, and you get turned down a lot by audiences. You know, I've been told people didn't like me before. I've had shows get canceled. I've had nobody show up before, but I've constantly just kept going and going. And now at 28 years old, I have met more artists that are similar to me than I have ever before, and through that we've gained quite a big audience in Toronto and in different cities outside of the GTA, London for instance, Cambridge, Waterloo, Kitchener, Orillia, all the way up to Barrie, you know. So I would think that the hardest thing to do as an artist is to find your audience and connect with them. And I think that'll be ongoing, and it hasn't deterred me at all. Then there's money, right? You can always worry about money. Trying not to starve, because who wants a day job when you play music all day? It's like very hard not to starve. So there's always a balancing act happening there.
What's your ultimate direction? Fame and fortune?
I don't know. I don't think fame and fortune would do me well. I'm looking for stability as a performing artist. I want to have my years booked up in advance so that I can just play music and practice as obsessively as I want. So I think a comfortable form of living would be something far more in my grasp. And I've witnessed it. I've studied with some people that are doing quite well. And fame and fortune, I don't know if I believe in that anymore. I don't think it's a reality that we have an option to achieve. If you're going to be honest with people, that is.
Where have you performed? And what are your favorite and least favorite venues?
I'll start off with least favorite. Least favorite venues are sports bars, where a bunch of meatheads go. You know, you get like the kind of like the hockey or the football team, or somebody eating like 300 pounds of wings and screaming and
Yeah.
throwing beer. Pretty much the kind of place where I normally wouldn't hang out. Loud, aggressive sports bars where they have UFC fights on, and I'm sitting in the corner trying to play love ballads. Those are typically not my favorite place to be in the world, and I've done my fair share of those. And I think my favorite places are coffee houses, markets, market squares outside, street festivals, outdoor stages, workshops, nightclubs where you charge a cover at the door. Some of the best places I've ever played are in Toronto and London. I actually have a really good time playing universities too. I've played a few college and universities in Southern Ontario, and I find those are just great. Good money, good audience. Usually a 50-50 on the sound guy, but that's all right.
Which songs do you perform most frequently? And do you ever play any covers?
Yeah, I play a lot of covers. I play a lot of like old blues covers for sure. I might do like one or two Neil Young songs, maybe some more contemporary pop stuff, maybe like oh geez, I don't know, an Oasis tune or something like that. But I generally do it the way I do things, so it's like bluegrass and country and all that stuff. So there's going to be a lot of that in my sets, but I do mix it up. I usually do 50-50 depending on how long the show is. If it's a shorter show, I usually play all original stuff, and usually the latest releases are what I play. I actually don't remember how to play half of my first CD. Like 30 songs ago, you know. But I'd say there's about 10 right now out of the last 2 discs that I do regularly.
What are your rehearsals generally like?
Me sitting alone next to my couch, playing for hours if I can. I try to go at least an hour to 2 hours every time. Sometimes I'll hit 4 or 5, sometimes I'll hit 6. Sometimes I'll get 15 minutes in and I just can't do anymore. But generally I go over something and try to memorize it as much as I can and perform it in every possible way, in every possible setting. I find the morning is the best time for me. Everything sounds much more peaceful in the morning.
What advice do you have for people who want to form their own bands or become musicians?
You have to love it. I think you have to be kind of crazy. So I'm not going to say that you should go out and be crazy, because I don't think that would do any good for the world. But I think you should really be honest with yourself and say that if this is what I want to do, I have to sacrifice these things. I may have to sacrifice most of my social life. I will have to sacrifice a lot of my daytime. I will have to sacrifice sleep. I will have to sacrifice cable, you know, whatever you can live without of, you know what I mean? Like, there are many sacrifices, and you've got to kind of find the ones that you're willing to take in order to do this. And if it's friends and family that you have to kind of see a little less of to do this, again, that's the question, can you do that? I've been lucky enough where, as a solo performing artist, it's much easier for me to make sacrifices than it would be for a band. Keeping a band together is something I've never done. All my bands have fallen apart, but I've decided that I'm going to do it the way I'm going to do it, and I'm in charge of my sacrifices. When there's 3 or 4 people involved, it can be very hard, as you probably know, trying to keep everybody's schedule the same. You know, at my age, people are married with kids. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not married and I don't have kids, and there's another sacrifice, you know. So you got to really know where you're going and be real with yourself. Is it working? Am I starving? Am I having fun? You know, it's all about having fun, really.
Is there anyone you'd like to acknowledge for offering financial or emotional support?
Oh man, I would like to say my friends for emotional support. and definitely my mom. My mom has been really, really supportive of me. My parents weren't that supportive of music for most of my beginnings. I don't think many parents are nowadays because they're so fearful of the way the economy is going, and but I think that for emotional support, my mom and my friends and my guitar. I'm gonna have to be perfectly honest and say that playing guitar makes me feel a hell of a lot better than doing a lot of other things. And if I'm really feeling bad and I'm really not feeling good about something, 2 or 3 hours on a guitar usually makes all those problems go away, or I get an idea of how to solve it. So there's the emotional support. I'm obsessed with music. I think financially, I've always had a day job of some kind. I started off working in a bakery. I moved over to Music World, selling CDs, as any teenager would. And then I got into teaching guitar for many years, 5 years. And I really, really didn't like teaching full time. It was very tiring. I found it detached me from music. I didn't feel like playing. So I got a job doing retail. And I've been doing that for the last 7 years, 6 years. 3 different stores now. And I find it's a good way to make some money part time. It's very stressful trying to play every night and work all day. Like 16 to 20 hour days are really hard on the body. And if you do 4 or 5 of those a week, it's another one of those sacrifices. So I would say that a day job is, I don't use government grants. I've never applied for any. I've never bothered to ask for money for any recordings. I use gigs and I use my job, or whatever job I'm doing, to pay for everything that I have so far. Guitars, recordings, studio time, all that.
How can fans to be gain access to your music?
I think the best way to gain access to anybody is the internet, for sure. Email lists are great. Getting on an email list is amazing so that you can find out when the shows are happening. But to check the seanpinchin.ca, for example, www.seanpinchin.ca, or MySpace, or Facebook is one of my favorites, because Facebook you really get to be sort of more hands-on with everybody, because I just find that it's tweaked a lot of the bugs that MySpace had to begin with. It doesn't litter your computer as bad. It's kind of like the Mac of the social network system. I find it's a little easier to navigate, and you can put anything you want up there. And so I would say the internet through YouTube is huge right now. I've recently started doing video blogs with a camcorder I have. And
so you've got a YouTube channel.
I do have a YouTube channel. I'm not really keen on keeping updated as much as I should. I'm kind of really not that technically inclined, but YouTube, iTunes, streaming radio, anything you can possibly use the internet for is the best way. Other than that, word of mouth. Word of mouth is a great way. Still to this day is a great way to get. People offer me so many shows a year on recommendations. And a lot of the times some of the big gigs I play before anyone even knows what I look like or sound like. So you really got to go in there with good confidence. So I would say the internet and word of mouth are my favorite too.
Do you have any last words? Any advice, or would you change anything?
I think I would have started doing the solo thing a little earlier. I think that
so if people they're not really sure if a band's going to work out, then perhaps they should go solo.
Well, sometimes I think that if you can do it by yourself, economically speaking, you will survive a little longer. For instance, bars and nightclubs are very willing to hire one person as opposed to 5 people for volume, and because $100 for one guy is not $100 for 4 guys. $25 is not worth your night, but $100, that's not bad for 3 or 4 hours of your time. And some places do more. So stylistically, I like solo music. I really think if you're a metalhead and you really like punk rock, I don't know if it would work for you, but I certainly think it's something to keep in consideration. Some of the best punk players and rock players and some of the best guitarists of all time have solo albums. Jimmy Page has a solo album. Hendrix did acoustic stuff. All these guys have that element. I think that if you're going to do this and you really want to be a musician, you've got to be obsessed. There's 3 O's, right? What do they call it? Obsession, obligation, and optimism. Those are 3 of I've read about these 3 O's being the key to success. You certainly got to be optimistic with everything, because it's hard when you don't have money coming in every day. But at the same time, if you're optimistic about it, you're feeling good about it, people are going to want to be around you. If you're obsessed with it and you're able to work on it, the idea is to be better than everyone else. Practice your butt off and become not just a decent guitarist or a decent singer. If you're going to do something, do one thing great. Find what it is that you like to do and that you can do better than everyone else, and exploit that. And do it as much as you can, and throw it into people's faces and see what they think. Because you're not hurting anyone by singing to them. So, and I think the last one is obligation. Every day I get up as early as I would for a day job when I'm not working to sing and practice. I've already put in like 2 hours today, and I'm probably going to put another 3 in tonight, or at least 2. And And that's been going on for 10 years, maybe 13 years actually. Even in high school, I just couldn't go to sleep without having to play at 45 minutes. Like the obligation is key. So I think if you can follow that guideline, you're going to be honest with yourself, and people are going to take notice of you. And be patient, because I'm 28 years old and I'm having my best luck now ever with music. I was not getting this much work at 25 years old. Wasn't getting this much at 19 years old. Now people know who I am. I sound a little better. They can rely on me a little more. If you're playing the proper style of music, I think growing up is the best thing that your career could ever have. Getting better. Every year I feel better about everything I'm doing. So, and good luck.
Why don't you show us some of your guitars?
Alright, I'll start with this. This is my 1934 National Steel guitar, which is called a Triolean model. It's the oldest one I think they've ever found, at least that's what the serial number says. It's made of metal, and it's very loud. I'll play a little blues for you on it streets and to keep up in brass bands, because trumpets are very loud and they didn't have amplifiers, so they would use these guitars to play along with horn bands and street bands and jug bands. As a side note, it works really well for slide guitar because the slide is usually pretty quiet, and on this particular guitar it's unbelievably loud. And music uses it. So this is my favorite kind of instrument. It's called a resonator, or a resophonic guitar, and it weighs like 15 pounds, and it's very expensive and very old. She doesn't tune well. She's got flaws. She's like any 81-year-old person will definitely not be moving as quick as they were when they were 20. So that's this one right here, and I named it Harland because my dad told me I was crazy to buy it, and his middle name's Harland, so I named it after him. And I'm not crazy. I got another one here. It's really old, but not as old. This is a Martin guitar. Martin is a company out of the States. They make great acoustic guitars. This one was made in 1959. And it's got a pickup on it. You can see it's got a metal pickup on it here.
Yeah, I can see the control knobs on it.
Yeah, this is very similar to what Kurt Cobain had on the Unplugged album, this electronics. This is called the DeArmond pickup. It's one of the first guitar pickups ever mass-produced on a guitar. This is called a 0018E. That's the model number. But it's really just a small body Martin. This particular guitar, being 60 years old, does not play as well as any other Martin I've ever played. And this is kind of a hard one to play. The neck's a little warped on it. But it sounds fantastic. I'll give you a little... See, it's a little quieter than on the other guitar, but it's got a completely different sound out of it.
It's warmer.
Much warmer. Less metal, more wood. The neck of this is made of, the fingerboard is made of Brazilian rosewood, which they haven't been using since probably 1960. I think they stopped in the early 60s. It's on the decline of availability, so East Indian rosewood's been used since then. So this has some really rare woods on it. The rest of it's just made out of mahogany and spruce. This guitar new would be about $2,700. And at the time, this was probably like $50 when this was made. But this is one of my favorite guitars to play currently. This is my newest guitar. It's very hard to play because the strings are very high, but for the slide playing that I do, it sounds just awesome. It's a little bit more traditional. That one. This is, I named him Rudy. As you can see, he's not in the greatest shape. He's got holes and cracks everywhere, and he wasn't as
character, though.
Yeah, that's character. This thing's got more vibe than most. And so these are my two oldest guitars. I have a couple other ones over here that are worth. One in particular that's worth mentioning. My When I first started playing slide guitar, I got introduced to Hawaiian slide, which is played across your lap. So I took a relatively expensive guitar that I had at the time, which is a Gibson Hummingbird, which is a nice acoustic guitar, and you raise the action on it, the string height, significantly. Yeah, it's pretty.
And that turns it into a Hawaiian.
Yeah, very similar to a lap steel. So you got to use a different slide for this. It's called a tone bar. It's a lot heavier than a slide, and it's pretty much like a metal lug.
Oh, you don't put your finger through it. You just hold it, right?
Yep, you just hold it like a dowel bar. This particular guitar is very warm, but you play it on your lap, and there's no fingering, so you just kind of there's no fingering with the left hand, that is. So you just kind of float with the slide. You'll hear a lot of country players playing similar instruments to this: country, bluegrass, and Hawaiian music. I don't play as much of those. I do folk, but played a show on them, so they're a little greasy, these strings. I've named this guitar May. My entire first CD was pretty much made with this guitar, and same with most of my second. There was a time in my life where I think all I played was this, and it sounds like two guitars playing.
Yeah, it does.
And a lot of guys think I'm blind, actually, when I'm sitting on the street playing this at festivals. They're like, how long's it been since you've seen Sean? And it's like I'm looking right at them going, I don't know. I blinked a minute ago. You know. So and typically this is not, everyone thinks of me and goes, this is a Jeff Healey kind of guitar. But no, Jeff Healey played guitar on his lap, not with a slide. This is pretty much a homemade version of a Hawaiian steel. The reason I use a regular acoustic guitar is I like the setup. I like the palm muting. I like the way it feels. I like the sound. Resonators are known for being lap steels too because they're very loud. But this particular guitar just has so much to it. And it's signed by my hero, Kelly Joe Phelps. Sean, music be true, Kelly Joe Phelps. There's a painting of him, as you can see. Kind of looks like my old roommate actually at the same time, which is freaky in many other ways. But this particular guitar has been used on weddings. I just played my sister's wedding recently with it, doing a lot of kind of love ballads kind of stuff, and I find this a very sympathetic and emotional instrument. I don't play it as much now as I used to, for I'm very much into the new guitars I have, these old suckers, but I don't go to a show without May, because this particular guitar impresses people. You know, if you have a bunch of singer-songwriters in a room playing the same sort of thing, then I pull this out and start going, they all think, what the heck's going on there? Thousands of hours practicing this guitar, and probably a few hundred gigs under it, and I'm amazed she's in as good shape as she is. This guitar was born in 2002, and
yeah, I hear something.
There's some stuff in there. Yeah, there's dust and debris and some broken pieces of wood. But realistically, I think this guitar, I would be buried with this guitar. If I had to pick one to be stuck on a desert island with, I would maybe think this is the one, just because it really captures so much emotion. It's such a very emotional guitar.
How did you learn the right-hand fingering technique?
Listening to Kelly Joe Phelps and Ben Harper. Ben Harper was one of the guys that first introduced me to this style of play. I actually didn't know it existed until I saw a video of Ben Harper, and I was like, what is he? There's an instrument he plays called a Weizenborn, which is a German instrument, where it's like an acoustic guitar, but the neck is hollow, like an acoustic guitar, all the way to the end, and it's set up like this, like a lap steel. And that's what he uses for a lot of his stuff. His new stuff's all done on electric lap steel, but his first few albums were done on a Weizenborn. And a girlfriend of mine at the time in high school gave me his first CD, and I was very impressed with his slide playing. Like, but it was very clean. I've never heard anyone else. Most slide players rattle off the neck when they're playing with their fingers on the bottleneck. And then when I saw a picture of him, I was like, you can play slide on your lap? So I guess listening to him do this, that's the basis to everything I do. It's called Travis picking, alternate thumbing, whatever you want to call it. The trick is to get your thumb to go independently. And then keep that going. And I think the more I got into blues and folk, a lot of the old blues players play with that technique, not just on lap steel, but on regular guitar too. You hear a lot of guys in the 60s doing that as well. Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin did it, you know, like, you know. I guess that's not really the Zeppelin version. The Zeppelin version of that song would be. Songs they were covering at the time, but they were using a lot of the same licks, and I just really incorporated it to a lap steel here. And I have a few instructional videos I've watched. I'm not really good at following directions, so this is sort of like 5 years of obsession. This is where the obsession part comes in. I literally did not leave my bedroom for 3 years. I did this. If you can be single for a long time, you can learn how to play lap steel too, because it's a very annoying instrument to live with somebody with. Heck of a conversation piece though. So those are my 3 favorite guitars. I have a couple other acoustic guitars that I use that are pretty standard for you know, contemporary use. But these are my 3 gems. These 3 right here are very, very, very special to me. And I'm going to be going on a few shows this week with them. They're probably with me 4 times a week live, every week of the year if I can. So that's May. There you go.
Nice to meet you, May.
Yeah, she's happy. Humidifier back in there.